For 7 years, she'd saved lives with scalpels instead of weapons. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was everything a doctor should be: compassionate, skilled, dedicated to healing. But when terrorists took her hospital, the woman who'd once eliminated high-value targets had to choose between the Hippocratic Oath and the SEAL Creed. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories where the healer must become the warrior, and where every saved life weighs against every life that must be taken, consider subscribing. Your support helps bring more untold stories of impossible moral choices to light. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood at the scrub sink outside Operating Room 3, methodically cleaning her hands with the ritual precision that had become second nature over 7 years of surgical practice. At 39, she was the youngest chief of emergency medicine in County General Hospital's history, respected by colleagues for her unshakable calm during the most chaotic trauma cases. The emergency department buzzed with typical night shift activity: car accident victims, heart attack patients, the usual parade of human suffering that walked through their doors. Sarah moved between cases with fluid efficiency, her hands steady whether holding a scalpel or comforting a frightened family member. What her colleagues admired most was her complete focus on healing. She never spoke about violence, never watched action movies, never even raised her voice during the most stressful moments. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was, by all appearances, the embodiment of medical compassion, someone who had dedicated her life entirely to preserving life. That carefully constructed image was both truth and elaborate deception. The truth was that Sarah had indeed dedicated herself to healing. For 7 years she had thrown herself into medicine with the intensity of someone seeking redemption, saving lives with the same determination she had once used to end them. The deception was everything else. Before medical school, before her residency, before she became Dr. Mitchell, she had been Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Navy SEAL Team 6, with 43 confirmed eliminations and more classified operations than she could officially acknowledge. Her transition to medicine hadn't been career change. It had been penance. Sarah's transformation from warrior to healer had begun 12 years ago with a mission in Somalia that had gone catastrophically wrong. Her team had been tasked with eliminating a high-value target, a warlord responsible for massacring entire villages. The intelligence had been accurate, the mission parameters clear, the execution flawless, but the compound they raided had also contained a makeshift medical clinic. In the chaos of the assault, Sarah had been forced to engage targets in a room filled with wounded civilians receiving treatment. The warlord used sick children as human shields, and in the split second of combat decision-making, Sarah had taken shots that eliminated the threat, but also struck 2 young patients who couldn't get clear in time. Mission success. High-value target eliminated. Minimal casualties. 2 children dead by her hand, despite their medical status as non-combatants. That night, Sarah had made a promise to herself that she would never take another life, no matter the circumstances. She completed her SEAL contract, used her military benefits to attend medical school, and built a new identity around healing rather than harming. For 7 years, that promise had held. Through gang violence trauma cases, through treating criminals who had hurt innocent people, through every situation that might have tempted her back to violence, Sarah had remained committed to the Hippocratic Oath: first, do no harm. Tonight, that promise would be tested in ways she had never imagined. At 2:47 a.m., the hospital's routine quiet was shattered by the sound of explosions from the main entrance. Sarah was in Trauma Bay 2, suturing a construction worker's lacerations, when the lights flickered and distant alarms began sounding. Her medical training said to continue treating her patient and let security handle whatever was happening. Her SEAL training said those explosions were coordinated breaching charges and the hospital was under assault. Dr. Mitchell called Nurse Patricia Reeves, rushing into the trauma bay with obvious panic. Armed men just came through the main entrance. Security's calling a code silver. Code silver meant armed intruder, lockdown procedures, hide and wait for police. Standard hospital protocol for an active shooter situation. But Sarah's experienced ear had counted at least 6 separate explosions, suggesting multiple entry points and coordinated assault rather than random violence. This wasn't a disturbed individual. It was a military operation. Through the trauma bay's reinforced windows, Sarah could see men in tactical gear moving through the emergency department with professional precision. They weren't shooting randomly or creating chaos. They were conducting a systematic search, clearing rooms methodically, looking for something specific. "Patricia, get this patient to the secure ward and implement lockdown protocol," Sarah instructed, her voice maintaining its usual calm even as her mind shifted into tactical assessment mode. "I need to check on other patients." "Dr. Mitchell, you're supposed to shelter in place during Code Silver." "I'm the Chief of Emergency Medicine," Sarah replied with quiet authority. "These are my patients, and I'm responsible for their safety." What she didn't say was that she had just counted 18 armed figures moving with the coordination of professional military contractors, and the police response time to this location would be at least 20 minutes. Whatever these men wanted, they would have it long before law enforcement arrived. Sarah moved through the hospital's corridors with the silent efficiency she had learned in SEAL training, using service hallways and maintenance access routes that most staff didn't know existed. Her official reason for mapping these areas had been emergency planning, but her real motivation had been maintaining situational awareness, old habits from a life she thought she had left behind. From hidden observation points, she conducted reconnaissance on the assault team. 18 men, professional equipment, coordinated communication, tactical movement patterns that suggested special forces training. They were searching room by room, but not randomly. They had specific intelligence about the hospital's layout. Most concerning was their restraint. Despite being heavily armed, they weren't shooting civilians or creating unnecessary casualties. They were controlling the situation with minimal violence, which suggested their objective was extraction rather than destruction. But extraction of what or whom? Sarah's answer came when she observed their movement pattern. The assault team was systematically working toward the intensive care unit, where the hospital's most critical patients were housed. Among those patients was Marcus Webb, a federal witness who had been admitted 3 days earlier after a car accident that looked suspiciously like an assassination attempt. The realization hit her like ice water. This wasn't random terrorism. It was a targeted operation to eliminate a federal witness, and they were willing to take an entire hospital hostage to accomplish their mission. Hidden in a supply closet, Sarah faced the first of many impossible choices that would define the next hour. She could maintain her medical oath, focus on patient care, and trust that law enforcement would handle the security situation. That was what Dr. Sarah Mitchell would do, or she could activate skills she had spent 7 years trying to forget, become Lieutenant Sarah Chen again, and engage 18 professional killers in direct combat. That was what her SEAL training demanded. The moral calculation was complex. Taking action would mean breaking her promise to never kill again, violating the medical ethics she had embraced, and potentially causing more casualties through escalated violence. But inaction would mean watching helpless as professional killers executed Marcus Webb and potentially other patients, violated the sanctuary of the hospital, and escaped to continue their criminal operations. Sarah thought about the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. But what constituted harm in this situation? Was it greater harm to allow killers to succeed, or to stop them through lethal force? As she wrestled with the moral implications, her tactical mind was already analyzing the operational requirements. 18 armed men with military training, familiar with the hospital layout, equipped with superior firepower and coordination, against one woman with medical training and rusty combat skills, armed with whatever improvised weapons she could acquire from medical supplies. The odds were mathematically impossible, which was exactly the kind of mission SEAL Team 6 had trained her to complete. At 3:15 a.m., Dr. Sarah Mitchell made her choice. She couldn't remain a pure healer while innocent people died, and she couldn't be a perfect warrior while maintaining her medical oath. She would have to be both simultaneously and accept the moral complexity that came with that decision. Her first action was medical. Using the hospital's communication system, she transmitted coded instructions to the nursing staff about protecting patients during active combat. Her second action was tactical. She began acquiring weapons and equipment for asymmetric warfare against a superior force. The operating rooms became her armory. Surgical instruments could serve as weapons, scalpels for close-quarters combat, surgical tubing for improvised restraints, anesthetic gases for area denial. The pharmacy provided chemicals that could be weaponized with her knowledge of human physiology. Most importantly, her intimate knowledge of the hospital's layout gave her tactical advantages the assault team couldn't anticipate. But as Sarah prepared for combat, she established rules of engagement that would preserve her medical ethics while acknowledging combat necessity. She would use minimum force necessary to neutralize threats. She would prioritize protecting patients over eliminating enemies. And most importantly, she would attempt to save lives, even among her opponents, when tactically feasible. The woman who emerged from the supply closet was neither Dr. Mitchell nor Lieutenant Chen, but a hybrid warrior healer who would redefine both roles over the next hour. Sarah's first engagement occurred in the pediatric ward, where two members of the assault team were questioning staff about patient locations. The presence of children changed her tactical calculus completely. Any combat action in this area required absolute precision to avoid civilian casualties. She approached using medical camouflage, wearing scrubs and carrying a clipboard, appearing to be a doctor checking on patients. The assault team had been briefed to control medical staff, not eliminate them, which gave her operational advantage. "Excuse me," she said calmly to the team leader, "I need to check on the children's medications. Some of them have critical timing requirements." As he turned to respond, Sarah struck with surgical precision, nerve strikes that caused immediate unconsciousness without permanent injury. Both men were neutralized within seconds, their weapons secured, and their radio equipment confiscated. But Sarah's medical training compelled her to check their vital signs and ensure they would recover fully. She used medical restraints to secure them safely, positioned them to maintain clear airways, and left notes for medical staff about their condition. 2 down, 16 to go, but now the enemy would know they were facing resistance. The assault team's reaction to losing contact with their personnel was immediate and professional. They shifted from search mode to combat mode, establishing defensive positions and beginning systematic room-by-room clearance with weapons ready. Sarah found herself in a deadly game of cat and mouse, using the hospital's complex layout to avoid direct confrontation while gathering intelligence about their capabilities and objectives. Her medical knowledge became a tactical asset. She understood exactly how to incapacitate opponents without killing them, how to use medical equipment as weapons, and how to exploit the unique environment of a hospital. Her second engagement was more challenging. 3 team members had cornered a group of nurses in the maternity ward, using them as human shields. while demanding information about federal witness locations. Sarah couldn't use direct assault without endangering the hostages. Instead, she used medical warfare. By manipulating the hospital's environmental controls, she created a localized release of harmless but disorienting anesthetic gas. As the assault team struggled with reduced visibility and mild respiratory irritation, Sarah moved through the chaos to extract the hostages and neutralize the threats. Again, her medical training compelled her to provide care for the unconscious opponents, ensuring they would recover without permanent damage while securing them for law enforcement. As Sarah continued her asymmetric campaign against the assault team, she discovered information that complicated her moral calculations further. Radio intercepts revealed that the team wasn't just targeting Marcus Webb. They had been hired to eliminate him because his testimony would expose a network of corrupt officials, including several in law enforcement. The men she was fighting weren't foreign terrorists or random criminals. They were professional soldiers working for people within the American government who wanted to silence a whistleblower. Her enemy wasn't evil. It was corruption at the highest levels of power. This revelation forced Sarah to confront an even deeper moral question. Was she fighting to protect justice, or to maintain a system that might itself be corrupt? Was Marcus Webb a legitimate witness deserving protection, or a criminal seeking to avoid consequences through false testimony? The information was fragmentary and contradictory, but it highlighted the complexity of her situation. She was making life and death decisions based on incomplete information, just as she had in Somalia years earlier. At 3:45 a.m., the assault team reached the ICU, where Marcus Webb lay unconscious and heavily sedated. Sarah arrived simultaneously, having used maintenance tunnels to reach the ward ahead of them. For the first time, she had the opportunity to confront the moral center of the entire situation. Marcus Webb was a mid-level federal contractor who had discovered evidence of massive fraud in defense spending, billions of dollars diverted to private accounts, weapons shipments to unauthorized recipients, and cover-ups that reached into multiple government agencies. His testimony could bring down dozens of officials and save taxpayers enormous sums. But Webb had also been complicit in some of the fraud, and his cooperation with federal authorities was motivated more by self-preservation than patriotism. He wasn't a hero whistleblower. He was a criminal trying to reduce his sentence by providing evidence against bigger criminals. As Sarah watched the assault team prepare to execute an unconscious man in a hospital bed, she realized that moral purity was impossible in this situation. Webb wasn't innocent, but his death would allow greater corruption to continue. The assault team weren't evil, but they were enabling systemic crime. Her choice wasn't between good and evil. It was between different degrees of justice and different forms of harm. Sarah's engagement in the ICU became the defining moment of her transformation from pure healer to warrior healer. She couldn't allow the execution of a patient under her care, regardless of his moral status. But she also couldn't kill men who were arguably serving their own version of justice. The solution required her to be simultaneously doctor and soldier, using every skill from both careers. She created a medical emergency that required immediate attention, triggering Webb's life support alarms to suggest he was dying naturally. As the assault team hesitated, uncertain whether their mission was already complete, Sarah struck. But instead of eliminating the threats, she used precise medical knowledge to incapacitate them without permanent injury. Pressure points that caused immediate unconsciousness, nerve blocks that prevented movement without causing damage, and pharmaceutical interventions that would keep them sedated until law enforcement arrived. Most importantly, when one of the assault team members was injured during the engagement, a ricochet that severed an artery, Sarah immediately shifted from warrior to healer, providing emergency medical care that saved his life. The man she saved had come to the hospital to commit murder, but in that moment he was simply a patient who needed her help, and her medical oath compelled her to provide the best care possible. By 4 a.m., Sarah had neutralized 12 of the 18 assault team members without a single fatality. But her success triggered a response from the network behind the operation. Additional teams were dispatched to the hospital, and corrupt law enforcement officials began coordinating to ensure the operation's success. Sarah realized that stopping the immediate threat wasn't enough. She was fighting a symptom of systemic corruption that would regenerate unless addressed at its source. The moral complexity deepened as she understood that some of the good guys were actually corrupt, while some of the bad guys were trying to expose corruption through illegal means. Her SEAL training had prepared her for combat, but not for navigating the moral ambiguity of fighting within a system where allies and enemies weren't clearly defined. Her medical training had taught her to preserve life, but not how to balance individual lives against systemic justice. The solution required her to think beyond immediate tactical objectives and consider long-term strategic outcomes. She began documenting evidence of the corruption network, using the assault team's equipment to record their communications and gathering intelligence that could be used for legitimate prosecution. The climactic engagement occurred when corrupt federal agents arrived to rescue the hospital from the assault team, while actually planning to eliminate both the terrorists and the witnesses, including Sarah herself. She found herself fighting a three-way battle, protecting patients from the original assault team, defending herself from corrupt federal agents, and trying to preserve evidence of the entire conspiracy. The battle tested every aspect of her hybrid identity. She used SEAL tactics to outmaneuver professional operators, medical knowledge to treat wounded allies and enemies alike, and moral judgment to make split-second decisions about who deserved protection and who represented the greater threat. In the most challenging moments, Sarah was forced to choose between saving the life of a corrupt federal agent or allowing him to die from injuries sustained in combat. Her medical training demanded that she provide care regardless of his moral status, but her tactical assessment suggested that his survival would enable continued corruption and potentially cost innocent lives in the future. She chose to save him, but also ensured he was secured for prosecution, embodying the principle that justice should be decided by courts rather than individual judgment, even when that individual had the power to act as judge, jury, and executioner. At 4:47 a.m., exactly 2 hours after the assault began, the hospital was secure. The original assault team was neutralized and in custody. The corrupt federal agents were exposed and arrested. Marcus Webb was alive and able to provide testimony, and most importantly, no patients had been harmed during the operation. Sarah returned to her medical duties, treating wounded personnel from all sides of the conflict with equal professional care. She provided detailed medical documentation of all injuries inflicted during the operation, ensuring that even the assault team members would receive proper treatment and rehabilitation. The official investigation would reveal the corruption network Webb had exposed, leading to dozens of prosecutions and significant reforms in federal contracting procedures. But it would also raise questions about Sarah's role in the operation and her unusual tactical capabilities. When federal investigators interviewed her, Sarah provided complete cooperation about the events, but maintained that she had simply used medical training and hospital resources to protect patients during a crisis. Her military background was noted but not pursued. Officially, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a hero doctor who had saved lives during a terrorist attack. Unofficially, Certain federal agencies noted her capabilities and began quiet discussions about whether she might be interested in consulting on future operations, requiring her unique combination of medical and tactical expertise. 3 months after the hospital siege, Dr. Sarah Mitchell remained Chief of Emergency Medicine at County General. To her colleagues and patients, she was the same compassionate healer she had always been. But internally, she had achieved a new synthesis of her dual identities. She no longer saw her SEAL training and medical practice as contradictory forces, but as complementary aspects of a commitment to protecting life. Sometimes protection required healing, and sometimes it required controlled application of force to prevent greater harm. Sarah established new protocols for hospital security that drew on her tactical knowledge while maintaining medical ethics. She began training other medical professionals in crisis response techniques that could save lives during violent emergencies. Most importantly, she accepted that moral perfection was impossible, but moral action was still necessary. The woman who had once promised never to take another life had kept that promise while still using warrior skills to protect the innocent. She had discovered that the highest form of moral action sometimes required accepting moral complexity rather than seeking moral purity. 6 months later, Sarah received a call from a federal agency she couldn't identify, asking if she would be interested in a consulting position that would use both her medical and tactical expertise to protect people in situations where conventional law enforcement wasn't sufficient. She accepted, understanding that her journey from warrior to warrior-healer was just beginning. Some battles required doctors who could fight, and some wars required fighters who could heal. Dr. Sarah Mitchell hung up the phone and returned to her patients, knowing that she was exactly who she needed to be, a healer who would never hesitate to become a warrior when innocent lives depended on it, and a warrior who would never stop being a healer, regardless of the circumstances. The Hippocratic Oath and the SEAL Creed were no longer contradictory. They were complementary facets of a commitment to protect life through whatever means necessary. Final question. From which city are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story of moral complexity and the warrior who became a healer without losing the ability to fight, subscribe to discover more tales of heroes who refuse to let perfect be the enemy of good when lives hang in the balance.